Disgraceful scenes at Amy Park over the weekend in the big derby, Melbourne City and Melbourne Victory. You may have seen the news around. There was a pitch of invasion and one of the players was actually attacked.
Cause a bit of a problem, and now we are going to have the referee has called for both sets of players to leave the field of play, and this is entirely unacceptable. Well, the fans are unhappy. That was understood. That was spoken about all week. We knew that was coming.
Now, I must admit, I'm not a massive A-League head, so I'm not super across it, although I did see this everywhere over the weekend. And Liam, I had so many questions about the context to what led to this.
Well, look, it's a real shame because obviously Australian football's running high and mighty at the moment with the World Cup on. You know, the Socceroos had that heroic display, made it all the way to the round of 16, lost by 1 goal to Argentina, who took out the whole competition this morning. And you saw like millions of people all around Australia at those live sites and getting around it. So like perfect opportunity to capitalise on it. And for me, I've been a fan of sport my whole life. And I remember the A-League was at its like absolute peak after we made it to the round of 16 in 2006. And everyone had that sort of World Cup fever. And instead what's happened is basically they've got this funding in the A-League, but what it means is the next 3 grand finals are going to be held in Sydney. Obviously, like the AFL grand finals always at the MCG, that's how it's worked for a long time. But in the A-League, it's like the team with advantage who finishes top, they normally get the home finals. Yep. So Brisbane have had it at Suncorp for many years when they were really successful. There's been some in Adelaide, in Melbourne, a hell of a lot. Admit,
I like that idea. I like that it's played in the state where the team's most successful. But having said that, that's not how you react, how they reacted.
So what was planned was a mass walkout at 20 minutes. So that was happening at all the A-League games over the weekend.
A mass walkout by the fans?
As in they were going to walk out of the stadium. But these twits got the wrong idea. They walked onto the field. And that's where it became a problem. So if it was like a peaceful thing, everyone walked out and it's like, we're not happy with this, then that's sort of making a statement. It would have been all right. But what's happened is it's been completely overshadowed now. So no one's even talking about that whole Sydney thing.
Yep.
Now it's all about, you know, Tommy Glover, the keeper, who's got a laceration on his face. I don't know if you've seen the photo.
Yeah.
He got a bucket, like one of those buckets that I think they use to put out flares, thrown with ice in it at his face. He's got concussion. It's fully cut his cheek open. Like, and these are players on the field. They should be protected, you know?
And similar to you, Ben, like you guys talk about soccer all the time and I couldn't care less, but this has been absolutely huge this weekend, and especially it being in Melbourne. Like I couldn't stop watching it. I didn't really understand why it was happening, but it all makes sense now.
I mean, you know, the news was in Times Square. Like they had it like Australian football fans attack players. And it's not like all the Victory supporters either. It's this, you know, there's this group of dickheads really who've sort of ruined it for everyone. There's only like a few hundred who actually came onto the field. Robbie Thompson is a Paramount Plus commentator. He was commentating the game when all this happened. Robbie, you obviously know, the walkout was planned. When did you realise that it had turned from something peaceful to something really violent and probably the darkest day in Australian football?
Good morning, guys. Yeah, it was a really strange evening. Even in the first 20 minutes, you could feel there was a little bit of electricity in the air because this was the biggest game of the round, and we knew that these, with Melbourne Victory, they have one of the biggest supporter bases in the competition. They have a very large active support. It's one of the great things about the club is the atmosphere that's at their games and this incredible electricity in the air, the colour and the noise that the fans generate. And on Saturday night, we were sort of thinking, okay, there's a risk that they might not just walk out peacefully because we've seen it in 3 previous games. The fans have unveiled banners saying we're not happy about the decision to play this year's grand final in Sydney and the next 2 as well. We're against that decision, and the fans have walked out. There was a feeling, a small risk that perhaps this wouldn't be the case here, just because the weight of numbers and the fact that I think the Melbourne Victory fans want, in particular, there was Melbourne City there as well, and it was a Melbourne City home game. It was a derby, but that they wanted to really make their mark. They wanted to show that they are not only against this decision, but also they are a powerful voice, and things just got out of hand. So when I was obviously commentating it, and we were waiting for that 20th minute for the walkout to begin, the banners were unfurled. Aggressive banners. There'd been some aggressive chanting against the APL, who run the A-League competition. And then the flares started, and it was Melbourne City that threw a couple of flares onto the pitch first. They were removed, but one of them started to burn a hole in the net behind Paul Izzo, the Melbourne Victory goalkeeper. So this is up the other end of the field. So the referee stopped proceedings because you can't play with a hole in the net. Plus the flares are obviously dangerous. And then another flare came down and actually hit one of our cameramen on the back of the head. Now those things can burn very, very, very hot. I mean, we're talking 900 degrees Celsius. And this landed on the back. It burnt clothing. And that's when you thought, okay, this is right on the edge now. This is unacceptable already. I mean, you can't do that. And then 2 more flares came down onto the pitch, and the first one, Tommy Glover, the Melbourne City goalkeeper, picked it up and just threw it back over the advertising hoarding where they were going into these metal buckets full of sand to extinguish them. And then a smoke canister full of orange smoke he picked up and he threw it back, and it went over into the crowd. And that was the moment, that was probably the final spark that caused, or didn't cause, but then was followed by this pitch invasion. And there, Tommy Glover just stood his ground, thinking, "What are you going to do? These are lines that don't get transgressed in professional sport, and quite rightly, and no matter the sport." And he stood his ground, and they were milling about. There's probably, I mean, you say a few hundred fans. I really don't think it was. I think it was about 100, 150. That made their way onto the pitch. There was only probably a handful of those that really had intent to run amok and cause a serious problem. But no one was prepared for what happened with the bin. Tommy Glover basically took a steel bin in the side of the head. The referee, Alex King, had moved there to try and protect him. There was very little security. They were outnumbered. They were trying to do what they could. The police were nowhere to be seen. And Tommy Glover was concussed, and in the end it was the Melbourne City squad and staff that ran, and Melbourne Victory players that ran to protect the goalkeeper and get him off the pitch. And it was just shocking. It was shocking because, you've talked about it, it's sport. It's sport that's been, and for football in particular, it's had a huge high with the Socceroos, and the sport is awesome. It was 36 hours before the World Cup final, which we saw this morning, which was one of the greatest World Cup finals of all time. So this sport brings huge passion, amazing passion. And some people, and you mentioned, you called them dickheads.
I believe I used that term, Robbie. Yes, yes.
I think that's a very nice term for what they are.
Completely ruined
because they're not interested in the sport at all. Or if they are, they're more interested in their own egos and running amok. And they ruined the spectacle, but they could have done a lot more. They could have very seriously injured Tommy Glover and Alex King, the referee, and themselves and anybody else that was there, and the cameraman for Paramount Plus as well. And it's just shocking. It left a bad taste in the mouth. And this is the sport that we know we love it because we're so passionate about it. I saw Andy Harper, my co-commentator, who has invested his whole adult life, and probably more actually, to this sport, to growing this sport in Australia, to lifting it to its base. And he was a crestfallen, shattered man seeing this. This sport means so much to people. It's a symbol for inclusiveness in Australia. It's a symbol for multiculturalism. It brings this nation, when it's at its best, together. And this just divided people on Saturday night, and it was cruel and heartbreaking.
Well, Robbie Thompson from Paramount Plus there, thank you so much for your time this morning. Obviously, you were commentating the game where it all went sour between Melbourne City and Melbourne Victory. A bit of a dark day for the sport off the back of such a successful World Cup campaign. So with any luck, things will rebuild. Of course, you can stream the A-League on Paramount Plus as well.
Thanks, Robbie. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.